Tēnā koutou, and welcome everybody to our council meeting on Local Waters Done Well. If we could all stand for our opening karakia. Tu taua mai i runga, tu taua mai i raro, tu taua mai i roto, tu taua mai i waho. Kia tau ai te mauriti, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, honge, huie, tāie. Just a reminder that this meeting is being live streamed on Council's Facebook page, and we have apologies today from Councillor Bogue. If I could have a mover and seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Price and Councillor Mawson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Any conflicts of interest? We have no public forum, no announcements by myself, any minor matters not on the agenda. Any announcements by the Chief Executive? There are no minutes to confirm, so we will launch straight into our one and only agenda item, but what an important agenda item it is. Local Water Done Well consultation options, and welcome to Andrew and Russell presenting the paper, and of course Dirk, our financial analyst in the back there, who will be able to answer all those tricky financial questions for us, I'm sure. So welcome to all of you, and we will get started.
Yes, kia ora. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now, this has been quite the journey, I think, to get us to this point, and I'm happy to take the report as read today, but I would really like the opportunity to go through some of the more critical aspects of this paper. Now, the purpose today really is to seek Council's approval of the water service delivery model option to be included in our formal consultation as required under the Local Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act of 2024. Now, the options we're proposing for consultation include the internal business unit, so essentially our current delivery model, but making the needed tweaks to meet legislation, the single council Napier-only water organization or water services council-controlled organization, and finally the regional Hawke's Bay water organization model. Now, the recommendation for the preferred option is the regional Hawke's Bay water organization model. So a bit of a background, I suppose. There's no short history of water reform and assessing alternative options in Hawke's Bay. A great deal of work was conducted after the Havelock North crisis, beginning in 2018 with Morrison Low, looking at different delivery models. The outcome of the Morrison Low report was the recommendation of a regional asset-owning council-controlled organization. Some of this summary is attached in your attachment 1 under separate cover, and that also includes a summary of legislation to date. Now, it's not an exhaustive list of advice or fact sheets that's been released from the DIA. It's more of what I consider the critical information at this stage. If public and councillors would like further information on that, I invite you to visit the DIA website, where they have quite an exhaustive list of advice and fact sheets around the legislation. However, I do believe officers have made a great effort to try and keep you updated of this legislative process through various workshops and council meetings along the way. So some of the key elements of policy include the introduction of economic regulation, the new planning and accountability framework, which we'll talk to a bit later, with the statement of expectation and water services strategies, essentially replacing LTPs for water service delivery, increased water quality measures, and restrictions against privatization. When legislation first came out, they did have 5 proposed models to consider: your in-house, the single council CCO, the regional CCO, but then they did offer the consumer trust and the mixed consumer trust council ownership model. Now, those last two, the consumer trust and the mixed consumer trust council ownership, do not have access to the local government funding agency or LGFA financing, and therefore those have been assessed to not meet legislated financial sustainability measures, simply because on the cost of what borrowing to fund those entities would be. Another key element of legislation has been financial sustainability. So that is essentially water service revenue sufficient to meet the costs of water service delivery, the cost of delivering, including regulatory standards, and the long-term investment needed. Now, I've always talked about that financial sustainability being like a three-legged stool, composed of your revenue sufficiency, so having sufficient revenue to cover costs, including servicing your debt, your investment sufficiency, so that's ensuring that your projected level of investment is adequate to meet growth, renewals, and maintain your level of service, and then financing sufficiency, which is having access to debt to fund your capital programs. Now, I suppose when you look at the delivery models, what's key to understand is how debt is going to be treated in all of those. So under your single counsel CCO and your in-house delivery, credit rating agencies are going to consolidate debt back to the parent counsel. So it's really going to have no effect on your borrowing capacity. When you start looking at the multi-counsel or the regional CCO, that's when debt is going to be held as a contingent liability, allowing the parent counsel a greater access to debt to fund its own capital programs outside of Three Waters delivery. LGFA has given constant guidance and updating their guidance over the months throughout this. On page 40 of the under separate cover attachments is their most recent guidance, where they actually give what the projected debt covenants for an in-house model, in-house CCO, and a regional CCO would be. Now, if you remember when we did some initial financial modeling back in January and February, we were required to really revisit that based on this updated guidance. And that's just because there was a change in what the perceived or expected covenant would be. We got some clarity on that, which made us have to go and revisit our financial modeling to see what this new debt covenant level would look like. Do have to caveat that the covenants are still just a recommendation, and guidance from LGFA is that it still will be negotiated at an entity level as they start reviewing water service delivery plans. Another big topic around legislation is stormwater and how it's been treated. Now, council still retains legal responsibility for stormwater. However, they have the option to transfer that responsibility to a water organization, either a regional or a single council CCO. And then the summary of this was that given the challenges of our stormwater network and its capital-intensive nature, we have always assumed that the responsibility of stormwater and those assets would transfer into either a single council CCO or the regional CCO if that was the model to be employed. Just maybe touch a bit more on the planning and accountability framework. As I mentioned before, really the two key document changes, I think, are the statement of expectations and the water services strategy. So the statement of expectations only applies to a single council CCO or the joint CCO. And what this is, it's the opportunity for the shareholding council or councils to issue to the board of directors, the new governors of those entities, what their expectation is for strategic priorities. It can really set out the framework for how they anticipate that entity to operate. Now, the water services strategy, as I mentioned, is somewhat like the LTP process, but specific to water services. As well, the level of granularity is actually a bit more enhanced than what's currently in our LTP. You have to be much more detailed in those first 3 years around your expected capital delivery, the costs and the revenue anticipated from your activity. Finally, there's another piece, which is the water services annual report. Again, similar to a council's annual report, where essentially the entity is now reporting on its performance back to the shareholders. Or if it was in-house council delivered services, it would be that activity reporting back to council. As well, within the under separate cover, there's further information that highlights some of the key features of each model in pages 51 to 53. Some of the issues that we're facing and the risks have been highlighted in page 43. And a lot of those really relate to financing, debt, establishment risks of either one or two of the other water organization options, Looking at our significance and engagement policy, this has been assessed to have a very high level of significance to community. So with that, we'll be going through a formal consultation process to inform our public and receive their feedback. Not to be confirmed, but the pending dates for consultation are 12 May through to 15 June. Looking through the report into the implications in the financials section, might spend a little bit of time on this, I suppose. Now, page 48 of the supplemental attachment looks at what the indicative price paths would be for Napier under the options. And at this point as well, I'd like to table an additional attachment that was just completed yesterday, which looks at what the actual debt projections would be for Napier City Council under the three models. So if we just start looking at the price path initially, I think what's critical to see is that the regional delivery model offers the most savings to public over the years. So by financial year 34, you'd be looking at about a $300 per annum savings in costs for water services as opposed to the single council or the council delivered services. And that's based on some of the financial modeling assumptions that are attached in that appendix as well. Looking at the balance sheet capacity and debt headroom, really, I think the key focus is the very last page where it has graphed out what the residual debt of council is once you carve out the Three Waters activity. So in the council delivered services or the single council controlled organization, by financial year 34, you'd be looking at about a 160% debt to revenue ratio. And then actually in financial year 31, we would be breaching our current debt covenant with LGFA, hitting at about 180% debt to revenue in financial year 31. With the regional CCO model, because you're able to have that debt treated as a contingent liability, you can see that in financial year 34, the debt to revenue ratio is actually sitting only at 75%. And it maxes out at about 120% in financial year 31. So having that Three Waters debt taken off of our balance sheet allows for a lot more debt headroom at the council level. It is worth noting that is under current LGFA covenants. If council were to obtain a credit rating, it would provide more comfort with debt headroom with that higher 280% debt to revenue limit that a credit-rated council receives from LGFA. So when we started looking at the options and evaluating them, again, we had the three, the internal business unit, the single council water organization, and the joint council water organization. We agreed on a set of assessment criteria. And how we approached this is we looked at all the previous work that had been done. We took the Morrison Moe report that outlined investment objectives and key principles. We built on the principles that were identified with the Regional Recovery Agency, our regional partners, and the work that PwC provide in the financial modeling. And then finally, we had an internal workshop in December where really what I said is we kind of consolidated or distilled all of those principles down into 6 key assessment criteria. So we have 4 that were defined as lasting criteria, and that's your value for money. So essentially what delivers the best value to our ratepayer. What provides enhanced delivery and capability, so capital delivery, more operational efficiencies from our internal city services team, but also a model that allows for the workforce to really develop professionally and build capability and a higher level of professionalism. We looked at increased resilience, both in terms of personnel to respond to significant weather events, but as well an organization that allows for additional debt access for large-scale recovery work if needed. And then community and Moana Whenua engagement, so being able to meaningfully consult and meet the expectations of our partners and our community. We then had those 2 barrier principles where we looked at ease of implementation, basically the risks of establishment, and then minimizing impact to community in the early stages if a new entity were created. So when we went through the assessment, we did our weighting exercise where we attributed a weighting to each one of those assessment criteria. And then we went through and we actually scored each delivery model against that criteria. At the end of that exercise, it was determined that the regional model, the Hawke's Bay Water Organization, was the preferred option, and then followed by the internal business unit, and then finally the Napier-only water organization as the third option. So the next steps from here, if the preferred option is accepted, is to begin the consultation process. As I mentioned, that would be running from 12th May to 15th June at this stage. After that, we would be holding hearings. We would be coming back to council with the paper that would take into account our consultation, submissions, hearings, and putting forth a paper to adopt the preferred option post-consultation. Looking further ahead, then we'd be going through the finalization of our water service delivery plan. That needs to be presented to the Secretary of Local Government on the 3rd of September. That's where you identify what your preferred model for delivering water services will be into the future. Then there will be a whole establishment time frame of going through the process of looking at governance structures, shareholding arrangements, change management plans, the full implementation spectrum of what would be required to employ or commence with the preferred option that is put forth and decided on. I'm happy to take as many questions as possible. It's a lot of information to try and consolidate into a short time frame, but yeah, please.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And yes, a lot of information, a lot of complexities, and it has very much been a sort of changing playing field through the legislative process. So I think it's really important that we do sort of run through all the questions that councillors have. So I'll open up to see who would like to kick us off. Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Thanks, guys. I actually think you've done a really good job of the paper. It's fairly succinct when you consider the journey that we've been on, through Hawke's Bay, the joint water in the last term and local water's done well now. My question is around credit rating. So when we separate out the financials the way that you have done in the attachment, thank you for that. We see benefit in a credit rating across all three options anyway. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that process would entail and how confident we are around that process as well?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. I can't speak to that too confidently, to be honest. I don't know if Caroline or if you've got any comment on what would be required for a credit rating. Thank you.
Through the Mayor. Yes, we would have to. The first step involved in the process is going out with a tender through a procurement process to tender for a credit rating agency. There's a couple of well-known ones out there like Standard & Poor's and Fitch. And then through that process, once we've appointed a credit rating agency, we then work through with them their requirements. They basically have to come into the organisation and pour through all of our accounts, look at all of our financials, go through a whole process. But we haven't kicked that off yet. It's imminent. When we, sort of the rule of thumb is that once you reach around about 100 million worth of debt, that you'll, 100,000 worth of debt. 100 million, I mean, getting my zeros wrong. It becomes feasible with the advantageous interest rates that you get versus the cost to be reviewed every couple of years by the credit rating agency. So that's about as much as I can tell you at this stage. Hopefully that answers the question.
Just one little, do we know how long that process would take?
I believe it would take probably in the order of 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Crystal.
Yes, through the Mayor, thank you again for the paper. One of the big criticisms about the Three Waters previous model was the lack of local voice in the process. So in this, I see that the governance model would have independent professional directors. So where does the local voice for Napier sit within a regional model? How do you see that?
Yes, that's a great question. Through you, Madam Mayor. That's really through the shareholding and the statement of expectation, and actually through Bill 3 of this. And that's where that language is quite unique, and they use water organization now instead of council-controlled organization, because within Local Government Act, the LGA, a CCO does not have the same level of shareholder influence as shareholders through a water organization do within Bill 3. There's some terminology such as within a statement of expectation they must give effect to. So the board must give effect to what that statement of expectation from the shareholders are. And that's really where that local voice comes into play. Further within Bill 3, when the board develops the water services strategy, that can actually be endorsed and amendments can be made by the shareholding council as well. So again, the council as the shareholders have that influence over prioritization of capital, ensuring the needs of their community are met. It's probably worth saying it won't be at the same level as direct governance, such as it currently is in council-delivered services, but through that statement of expectation, as long as that is a robust, planned process, there's still, I think, a great deal of influence that local government can still have over the delivery of their water services.
Thank you. Just a further question. And I know you briefly
You might just need to bring your microphone a little bit.
briefly mentioned it. It's going to be set up so it can't be privatised, isn't it?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct. There's provisions against privatization all throughout the legislation.
I know that's another concern in the previous model. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Just obviously, Napier are setting the pace in this one, with our paper being the first paper. Does it have, what if another council doesn't agree with our preferred option? What's the path then?
Another great question through you, Madam Mayor. At this stage, all of the modeling that we've done has been based on all 4-member councils, so Wairoa District Council, Hastings District Council, Central Hawke's Bay District Council, and us. All that financial modeling has been in with all 4. I would recommend that we still consult on it being the regional. If we were in the position that there was not that agreement, we would probably have to look at some financial modeling of what that would look like to just ensure that the benefit still remains to what we're proposing here. But in this context, I would suggest that we still consult that the preferred option is the regional. If we don't have that unity, then we would have to do some further work to see what the impacts of that would be.
Okay, and I've got stormwater is one that sort of I have trouble following a little bit, and that the regional council's in there with us as well. How would, just in a few words, how would that be solved? The ownership, that's all, because the regional council are not in on this
Yes.
option.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think we would have to start, we'd be bringing them along the journey very quickly and assessing the critical point of where we can action an asset transfer. Ideally would be the outcome of that, given the mixed model ownership that exists, the challenges that we face. We've looked at some indicative modeling with HBRC assets. We just have to do a bit more scrutiny, I think, about prioritizing what the investment would be required. But at some stage, there would perhaps during the implementation, when we look at transfer agreements between our 4 councils, bringing Hawke's Bay Regional Council into the conversation there and looking at what that transfer arrangement would be, so that at the indicative go-live date, there could be the transfer of the HBRC assets into the proposed regional model as well.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, team, for the report. My question was also around the modelling, so I think it sort of flows on nicely from Councillor Price's. So, and I do appreciate all of the work that's gone into that modelling. I know it's been really complex. So, including the projected efficiencies and economies of scale, I guess I'm interested in, could you elaborate on how the cost modelling accounts specifically, I guess, for Napier's comparatively quite low debt levels and historically low water rates, and how our residents can be assured that they won't disproportionately subsidise members of the CCO?
Very good question. Through the chair, all the price paths that we've put forth today do not include price harmonization, so that's probably one aspect. A lot of, there could be assumptions that we've assumed price harmonization over these, but we have not. So really, all we're looking at is the core efficiency of some operational efficiency, capital expenditure efficiency, offset against the establishment costs. So for establishment costs, we used the previous work conducted by Morrison Lowe and really just adjusted those for inflation. So in terms of that cross-subsidization, all we're really looking at is what we would have for efficiency. So without harmonization, there wouldn't really be any cross-subsidization. And we've been really careful to not model that harmonization or not discuss it too much because we don't know if that will be allowed for under regulation. It's quite a big assumption. If there was harmonization, then we would see a greater increase to Napier's ratepayer to then allow for greater decrease to our neighbors who have significant higher costs than us.
Thank you. And so just working on that, the economies of scale and the projected efficiencies, what is the projection? Can you talk us through that? And can you give us your professional view on whether or not you believe that's realistic? I think in one of the workshops we talked about other models around the country where we've seen the amalgamation of activities within council and actually those projected efficiencies not being delivered. So I would like to get a feel from you around whether or not you think the modelling that we have done for economies of scale and efficiencies are realistic in your professional view.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. So in terms of the capital efficiencies, we had a 1% capital efficiency starting in year 3 and growing by 1% per annum to 5% in financial year 34. Then for the operational efficiencies, we had a 2% commencing in year 3, growing to 12% by financial year 34. In my view, those are very conservative. When we had this work peer reviewed by another consultancy, they were pushing for more around that 20 to 30% of capital efficiency by financial year 34, and upwards more of 15 to 20% in the operational efficiencies. To give you some context, I believe in some of the previous reform work, they were looking at more 40% efficiency around capital delivery. I can't remember what it was for the operational efficiency. So when we compare what we've done versus what's out there through other consultancies and previous work, I think it's very conservative. And we wanted to take that more conservative approach, just to be erring on the side of caution, I suppose. Even just in more informal conversations, everyone talks about more 15% around operational efficiency is what you should realistically be able to achieve with a larger scale entity.
Great, thank you. That provides a lot of clarity. If it's all right, Madam Mayor, I just have one last question around governance structures.
Before we do that, because I've just got a question sort of following on in the same vein, and then we'll go back to you. The other component around sort of the efficiencies and economies of scales is the stranded overheads. What modelling have we done around what that looks like and how we will work through that process?
Yes, again, through you, Madam Mayor. Stranded costs, we used what was modeled previously by the Morrison Lowe work. I have highlighted that as one of the risks, and that would have to be a more dedicated work stream, I think, through that implementation phase. to get a full understanding of what that would look like. And then not only that, but to mitigate that risk. And I think when you get a further understanding of that, it could really influence when that go live date would be and what your implementation process would be to minimize the impact of those stranded overheads. So there has been a cost associated to that, but the accuracy of that I couldn't speak to, just an assumption at this stage.
Right. No, that's very helpful. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I just had a question around clarifying the governance structures of the proposed HBWO. So, in particular, for how they will affect Napier. So I'm interested in how that structure will be designed to ensure that, what measures will be implemented to ensure that Napier's specific strategic priorities around our three waters assets, like we've seen. I think the Mayor spoke at our public meeting that we've spent $111 million since 2019 on these assets and have seen significant growth in our investment. So being that that has been a strategic priority for Council, how do we ensure under the new governance structure that that voice is maintained?
Very good question. Through you, Madam Mayor. Again, some of that work will have to be done in that implementation phase. I think the shareholding agreement is going to be quite critical to then determine that level of shareholding in an organization, understanding that no council should have more than 50% just to maintain that balance sheet separation. In terms of prioritizing our strategic values and the principles that are important to Napier residents, that's, again, through that statement of expectation, I believe, and being quite prescriptive, if you will, around what you expect for your community, and having the board agree to that prescriptive nature of prioritization. Through this work, we've looked a lot at what's happened in other regions and other areas, and Taswater, I think, is a great example of an area that went through pretty significant reform. I believe they started at about 24 independent water service providers, amalgamated into 3, and then finally into 1. But one of the core principles that was agreed to as Taswater was clean drinking water for all, and they rolled out a very extensive program of water treatment plants. So they finally alleviated the final boil water notice, I believe 3 or 4 years ago, by prioritizing clean drinking water and actually establishing treatment plants within very small communities that otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford it. So perhaps that doesn't talk to the priorities of our residents, but I think there's the opportunity to set greater priorities at a regional level as well to ensure that everything is met for everyone within that organization, and not to forget as well through that scale having access to greater capital to then enable those priorities should not be underestimated. So it could be argued that by going regionally and having more access to debt, that is an enabler to fulfill the priorities that are important to your community.
Thank you, Mayor Wise. I have another question, but it is related to operational models, so I'm not sure if you want to take that now or later.
Happy to take it now.
Happy to take it now. Thank you. One of the things that I think is important to Napier is that we have an in-house service delivery model with our depot team, and I believe we are the only one regionally that do that rather than outsourcing to contractors. And so I guess my question is, being that that is of interest to Napier, the potential maintaining of that service and all of the institutional knowledge that comes with that, what is the decision-making gateway, I guess, for how this new entity will operationalise its delivery?
Yes, through the chair. That would probably be sitting with governance, the shareholders, the statement of expectation, and then perhaps at the board level as well, and a recommendation from the board back to governors of what the operating model could look like. Again, in talking with some of our Australian friends that have gone through this, there's strong support of that internal business model. A lot of organizations there that have utilized that or retained that generally see about a 15 to 20% savings in their operations delivery based on no margin to a contractor. And I'm of the belief that as that is our current model, we could be a real strong advocate and champion for that model and set precedent in a regional water organization of the benefits of the cost benefits, that institutional knowledge. Again, one of our criteria was building capability. And I think operationally in a larger entity that is significant that, we've got network experts. Not saying that they will be Hastings Networks experts straight away, but there's that ability for them to expand their knowledge base and influence how that operating model would actually look like.
Fantastic. And just supplementary to that, if I may, Mayor Wise, thank you. I think that's great to hear your sort of view on that particular component of the delivery. Being that there is, I think, something of real importance to Napier and that the gateway, what I'm hearing, is at a later stage once we have a governance model established. What, if anything, could we do at this stage, thinking of our going out for consultation on a preferred move, could council do to indicate that that was our preference or cement it ahead of a conversation around statement of expectations?
Kia ora. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through the Chair, I think what we can do is reassure you that at the CE level and the conversations that we're having with RRA, each of us have our own focus for different councils. So part of that phasing as we go through will be about the negotiation. So for certain non-negotiables, Napier will have a view, Hastings will have a view, and as will our counterparts in Wairoa or Central Hawke's Bay. So we've been very clear during this whole process about some of the things that are important to us. And so they will come as no surprise when we go into that negotiation phase, if that's where we end up in terms of a regional model. So we've been very clear about how we perceive our strengths and what we see as a centre of excellence. And so it will be through that next phase and that negotiation, but it will come as no surprise that for us, we see that as a real strength.
Thank you. So just clarifying, you don't see any benefit in additional weight sort of being given at this decision milestone to that kind of future negotiation?
I think we're very clear on that. Obviously, if elected members would like to do that, we can, but I feel that we've been very, very clear, as have our counterparts, as to what's important to them as we go through the process. So,
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. There are three pieces of legislation that underpin this process and change. Some of those pieces of legislation aren't settled yet. So we're being asked to make policy decisions, and best policy is made under known legislation. So and while a government can change legislation at any time, so my concern here is that we're being asked to make a policy decision effectively without settled legislation. Can you just work me through which pieces of legislation have been finalised of the three, and when in the forecast schedule of legislative readings at Parliament the next pieces of legislation are due to be finalised? Because I think that contextualises here the decision making that we're being asked to make in a vacuum with a number of unknown variables. And I just wonder if you could just explain that to me, please.
Absolutely, great question. Through you, Madam Mayor. So 3 discrete bills that were put forth through legislation. So Bill 1 was the act of repeal, and I believe that was February 2024. That followed by Bill 2, which was the Preliminary Arrangements Act, and that was passed into legislation, I believe, in September 2024. In that interim period, there was policy statement releases that would indicate what Bill 3 was going to be. So Bill 3, the final enduring setting, if you will, was introduced in December, and that is anticipated to be passed in July, August of this year. Now, I appreciate that that is unknown, but some of those enduring settings, I would say, are not as critical to the path of determining your model as Bill 2 was, the Preliminary Arrangements Act. What that required was councils to submit the water service delivery plan by 3rd of September. and that is now a legislated mandate. And within that was looking at your current delivery. Would it meet the financial sustainability metrics that were outlined in the Preliminary Arrangements Act? If not, what are the alternative delivery methods that could? And that's pretty much the process that we've gone through. So our very first look was the initial viability assessment that we presented to council, I believe, in October, which was a bit of a snapshot of where we are. And if we continued on the current path, would we meet those financial sustainability metrics? The answer there was no. We would require quite significant increases to revenue. So then it was decide what are the options that could, and that's what's brought us on this journey of financial modeling and looking at the different options of an internal CCO or the joint CCO. So yeah, I appreciate that it's a lot of unknowns still in terms of Bill 3, but what is known, I suppose, is that there's going to be economic regulation where a regulator could mandate you to set a minimum revenue threshold. They could mandate your level of investment into renewals to ensure that you're fully funding depreciation, that you've actually set aside enough capital to fund your levels of growth that you're anticipating. Those are knowns. So now what it is deciding on the model to meet those knowns, if you will. But I appreciate there's been uncertainty and constant change through this process.
Thank you for that explanation. I think it's clarity for both our residents and us that we're sort of in a awkward position at the moment. But I think the work that's been done has been tremendous, and I think the options put forward demonstrate a good case that we should be consulting on, and it'll be interesting to see how residents reply to the consultation process. Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess to summarise that, essentially we have no choice in the timeline. It's been dictated to us by central government. We must go out for consultation now to be able to meet that September deadline for our water safety plan. So despite the uncertainty with the legislation. Councillor Crystal and then Councillor Gregg.
Yes, through the Mayor. Just a question. The CCO, if this goes ahead, obviously it would be quite a costly thing to set up. And how long does that process take? And is there any indication that the government may contribute to the setup costs?
Very good question through you, Madam Mayor. Duration, I think, would be unknown, and that's, I think, really to be discussed through shareholding and implementation. I think the first thing to decide on is what are the key necessities from day one. What does your first day one of operations want to look like? How separate do you want to be? Would you rely on certain things back at your shareholding councils, such as systems, billing, customer service requests, that sort of thing? Or would you look to try to establish an entity that's fully self-sufficient with new systems, with asset management, ERP, all of that? So I think that would have to be determined to then look at what's the lead into that and when would a realistic go-live date be. We've discussed, is it possible July 1, 2027, July 1, 2028? I think July 1, 2028 would be something to work towards. And then, again, agreeing on what are the key things required to reach that date. Establishment costs, we've used some very primitive numbers from Morrison Lowe, looking at about $8 million for a regional entity, and that's built into the financial modeling as the establishment cost. Again, what do you really need, though? Would you be looking at new property, new office accommodation for that entity, or would you just use existing for the time being and stage it? So those establishment costs are a bit in flux as well until you fully agree on what does it look like. Funding from central government, there's been no indication at this time. Everything has been funded as is. So we'll see if something comes from central government to help us along this journey. If not, it's something that we would then have to look to budget into the regional model.
Councillor Gregg.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. My question is regarding communication between the partner councils. Do we know what stage other councils are at the decision-making process at the moment, and how are we communicating with them about it?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Regionally, a lot of the work's been coordinated by the Regional Recovery Agency. So there's constant ongoing meetings. Weekly officers meet at a level, and then I believe there's briefings to mayors and CEs as well. In terms of where they're at in the decision-making, I believe Wairau and Hastings were having workshops this week with their elected members, and CHB, I believe, had one last week. CHB is set to go to council, I believe, next week, just before Anzac Day, with Wairau and Hastings set to go, I believe, April 29th for their decision on the preferred option for consultation.
Councillor Brown. Kia ora, through the Mayor, and thank you for the report and the screeds of work that's gone on to getting us to this point. I see there's 3 options that we're consulting on, and we've explored option 3 quite a bit. Keen to explore some of the limitations and challenges around option 1. First, around capability and resilience. Could you talk us through some of the practical implications of retaining an in-house model? I'm particularly interested in how well it could realistically respond to the increasing complexity of our water infrastructure and the climate emergencies that are in front of us.
Great question. Through you, Madam Mayor, I think for the internal business unit with resilience, one of the key limiting factors there is going to be that debt capacity. Through the indicative modeling, we will be breaching that without obtaining a credit rating by financial year 31, I think it was. So if you can imagine another significant weather event that required a lot of capital investment, we just simply wouldn't have access to it under that council-delivered service. As well, when you look at capability and responding to an event, we're already operating under some pretty challenging labor restrictions, in my opinion, and that affects personnel being able to actually go out and respond during our weather events. There's always a good coordinated effort with HBRC around our stormwater drains, but you could imagine that with the entity of scale, just being able to deploy more resource because you've got that at your fingertips would just be an enhancement. As well, just having that access or greater debt capacity to fund any of that recovery work that may be required.
Yeah, supplementary. Just clarifying, did I pick up that it's unrealistic that we could meet the financial sustainability requirements within option 1? With that debt headroom you mentioned?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we would meet those metrics, but we would be in a more constrained environment. Our very initial viability assessment was a no, but then we started looking at the financial modeling of what would be required. And I guess that's the big reality is under any model, it's going to be an increase in water rates or water charges to our community. So when I originally said no under the initial viability, that was under the current revenue stream. With the modeling that we've done, we could all meet those financial sustainability metrics under the council-delivered service, just with the revenue required to indicate that we've got the revenue sufficiency, essentially that our revenue covers the costs of our water services.
Also, just to give a bit more context, and I think Councillor Simpson's already alluded to it, we're also in a bit of a moving feast around the definition of financial sustainability. And what we've seen this week is 2 letters that have come out. One was from Te Mata Arawai, which gave us, I guess, a gentle prod that their expectations of what we have to deliver are going to increase significantly. And I think that went to all councillors, certainly went to the Mayor as well. Which with those requirements come additional costs. And secondly, from the Commerce Commission, which again have released a letter that gives us an indication of what they're doing with water care and a sense of what would be expected going forward. So I think what you're seeing is whilst that is an option, and as Andrew's explained why we've come up with the criteria and the outcome that we have, so yes, we could, but it is the financial sustainability question, which is the challenge, and that's what we don't have clarity on, as Councillor Simpson sort of alluded to. We're still playing catch-up, but the signals from the 2 letters that have come out this week indicate that to achieve financial sustainability in terms of the Commerce Commission's expectations for the standards from Te Mata Arawai, that may put additional pressures on us if we were to retain in-house because of the caps and constraints that we had if it was an in-house service. So it isn't a definitive answer because of that being such a moving feast, but I think they're the indications that we're receiving.
Cool. And just because we're in public and there's lots of, I don't know, big words being thrown around like price harmonisation and all of that. Just so basically what you're saying is we could still do it in-house. It's going to put lots of pressures on our team. We may not be able to have the debt headroom to respond easily in an event. And it likely means that rates would have to increase significantly.
Rates will significantly increase under any of the models.
Yep.
The modelling that we've got currently indicates that a regional model, the rates would increase less than they will under any of the others. But under any scenario, rates
cost
will
is
increase
right.
significantly.
Yeah. Okay. And final question from me. So I acknowledge that it's a legal requirement that we consult on this option. And I'm just concerned about the political risk of consulting on a risk that we just heard. It doesn't sound all that flash and not all that viable considering we've got better options on the table. Just wondering how we would manage the political risk if the community strongly preferred option 1, given that it's unsustainable in the long term.
Well, I guess through the chair, that's probably not an officer
No.
question. What we do need to do, though, is we do need to consult, and as we've always do, we do need preferred option, and for all the reasons set out in the paper, that is why officers' recommendations is that the preferred option is the regional model.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, we really are keen that the community give feedback to you. And obviously community feedback is one part and a very important part of this process, as well as all of the other aspects. And once we're through consultation, we may have a clearer direction on some of the other elements too. So remembering at this stage, we are simply making a decision on consultation. We're not making a decision on the model.
Yes.
And to add to that, as governors, it is our role and our responsibility to ultimately make the decisions, and a part of that, of course, and a fundamental part of that is the feedback from our community, and therefore it is also our responsibility to be out and about in our community, ensuring that they understand the information that we're presenting to them and asking them to provide feedback to us on. And I know you are all out there actively every day talking to our community, so I just strongly encourage you, because this is such a vital decision for our community, to get out there and answer questions and give our community the information they need to feedback to us.
And I suppose the assurance I was looking for is that we'd have feedback into the consultation, which is coming to us next week, right?
It is on the 29th, yes, and the
Perfect.
actual communication plan is part of this particular paper.
Yep. Cool.
Councillor McGrath.
Just through you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, the comments you made before about the likes of debt headroom, that's based off the current status quo model, as opposed to if we had the credit rating and got to 80%, would that change the thinking as opposed to, I guess, the status quo that you were commenting on before?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. It would allow for greater debt headroom at the council level. Would it change the thinking? It's maybe a difficult question to answer. I think the one thing that we need to recognize still is that going into the regional, having that off-balance sheet still gives you the greater debt headroom regardless of having a credit rating or not. And I suppose that then provides the opportunity for council to consider if they would like a credit rating or what the cost and what the benefit is. As Caroline alluded to, you have to have around 100 million worth of debt for it to then become a net benefit of having a credit rating. If you're not at that level, then it's an additional cost that you're just not receiving any benefit for. So if you had that balance sheet separation. It just buys council some more time to consider the requirement of obtaining a credit rating or not.
Okay.
So just to clarify though, even with a credit rating, the regional water organisation is the model that offers us the greatest headroom.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. A question about governance of a regional water entity. So it says in the paper that council staff or elected members cannot be appointed as governors of the board. What kind of skills or people would the board be looking for?
Yes, great question. Through you, Madam Mayor. Legislation defines it as a board of competence, yet it does not go through and indicate what competence actually is. So it would be up to shareholding council to determine what level of competence they're looking for. We've discussed Te Ao Maori as being a needed competence, and then there's partnership at that governance level. But realistically as well, I think you'd be looking at other highly regulated utilities and the composition of their boards, strong asset management skills, financing skills. I think a good code of practice would be to lean on the likes of those regulated utilities and how they establish their boards for guidance. As well, sorry to build on that, there is discussions at a industry level through Water NZ and the Institute of Directors within New Zealand to look at what that pool of talent looks like as well, because that has been identified as a risk, I think, to all councils that could be looking at a water organization model. Is there enough talent to actually establish all these boards as well? So that's something the industry is aware of and is working towards.
Just a further question for me, and we have touched on this in a response to some of the earlier questions, but I guess I just want to articulate it really clearly. Late last year and probably even earlier this year, we were looking like our preferred option was going to be a single water organisation based on all the modelling that we'd done. So if you could just sort of summarise how it is that we've now shifted to a recommendation around a regional water organisation. And I appreciate that summarising is...
No, that's, I think, through you, Madam Mayor. Initially, that was some of the thinking. As work progressed, I think one of the big changes was the LGFA announcements and the different debt covenants that would be treated at a regional water organization level versus an internal CCO level. That did shift some of the financial modeling in favor of the regional water organization. I think looking at it as well, it comes down to how we assess the criteria and what those weightings were that we attributed to the key principles, and recognizing the need for greater debt headroom for resilience work, for a model that develops more capability within itself. A lot of messaging from DIA is really wanting to build a greater level of professionalism within the water industry and seeing more of a collaborative effort. Louise talked about incoming economic regulation and the letter now from Te Mata Ottawa and those requirements that were needed to meet in terms of environmental standards, drinking water quality standards. All of these pressures that are coming out is really going to restrict in-house or smaller water organizations, and the best way to respond, have flexibility to adapt, and meet the ongoing challenges that are becoming our way is through larger entities. And I think that really more was captured through our assessment criteria and when we assess the options rather than in a real change of direction. I think anything that we've done is we've gathered as much information as we can. We put it all out there for us to workshop through, and then we came up with the outcome that actually said the regional model is what was best to go to community with our preferred option as.
Thank you. Any further questions? Is there any general discussion before I will be moving from the chair, but just opening up for any general discussion before I do that?
Sorry.
Councillor Pareha.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Just regarding staff, will there be job losses or restructures within the current Napier City Council water team? And if so, how will staff be supported?
So probably the best I answer that. So through the chair, Councillor Taraha, do you mean in relation to the establishment of a regional water
Or
services?
either of the options?
So under any of the options, we need to reorganise the structure of the organisation to enable us to ring fence water costs, revenue, etc. So under any circumstance, we will need to make some changes. It's probably premature to say what that would need to look like under a regional entity, but under any circumstance, we have obligations and a duty of care, which we would absolutely fulfil, and we would continue to support any staff through any changes. So, yes.
Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, and I might be jumping down a little bit here. I'm just looking at F in the recommendation about officers summarising the outcome of the consultation and everything. I'm just wondering, and it may be better suited as an action point, if councillors could see all the submissions as a whole, as we have in the past, rather than just a summary, that can we have both?
We always do, but
Yeah. So through the chair, that wasn't our intention. Yes, you will have everything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
great. Okay, if there's no further questions or general discussion, as I said, I am happy to move from the chair. It's quite a comprehensive list of recommendations, but to summarise it, we're essentially today deciding on the preferred option that we are going out to for community consultation. If I could ask for a seconder, please. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan. Look, first and foremost, thank you so much to all of the team. This has been a very long and comprehensive and complex journey. In my time as Mayor, water has been an absolute top priority for this council, with significant investment to ensure that we have clean, clear drinking water, that we have been building resilience against flooding, and that we're working to improve the quality of water being discharged into our waterways. Reviewing how we deliver water services for our community has also been a priority over this time. And it's really important that we look at all the ways to ensure we are delivering our water in the most effective and efficient way possible. As a region, we have actually been investigating a regional water services delivery model since 2018, well before this became a directive from central government. We have taken a leadership position throughout this process, from a governance perspective and with our own comprehensive water services program. We know change is essential, and we have wanted to stay in the driving seat throughout the process, which in more recent times has been controlled very much by central government. As much as we would like to in some regards, and we know it is possible to go it alone in terms of value for money, it potentially makes greater sense to work with our neighbours and drive hard for a model that includes multiple TAs based on the financial modelling that we've been working through. Financially, in terms of our low debt, we are in a position of being able, again, to chart our own course, but we've heard that there are greater benefits in being collaborative with the regional model option. One of the main ones is our workforce, which has been discussed today, and the benefits with regards to our workforce. We all know that we have some excellent people across all levels of our water services, from our city services team through to our engineers and our more senior staff members. For them, a joint approach may benefit them professionally, giving better development pathways for them. And we also need to acknowledge that resourcing across these types of services is scarce, and a regional model, again, may provide better benefits. We have done a lot of analysis and modelling, and we've drilled down to the things that are most important for our community: cost, resilience, levels of service, and engagement. We've also looked at the change criteria, the challenges of implementation, and the impact of the changes on our community. And although a joint approach is going to be more challenging in the short term, because it would be a significant change, across the board on those lasting measures, together could be the best way to go for Napier. It's also really important to understand the stages of this process. What we are currently doing is going out to our community to ask them what their preference is in terms of a water services delivery model. We will then put that into the mix of information we deliver to government in September. We are presenting government with a proposal that we have prepared with our community. And government will then confirm our approach, or they may well tell us to go back to the drawing board, and we need to be prepared for that potential outcome. Above all else, our community's voice is essential, and we have said that throughout the many years of potential water reform, it is our community's voice that is essential. We will listen, and we will take our community's views to Wellington. From there are still many on-ramps and off-ramps. So at this stage, we are looking for a temperature gauge. Go it alone or work together across the region. We know working together could work well, as long as, and this is incredibly important, as long as the model ensures local voice and local representation in all of our decision-making around our water services. Fine-tuning of the model and what things will actually look like is for further down the track, as we have discussed today. The details around shareholding, the details around the operational model, that is all still to be discussed and decided on further down the track. What is important now is consulting with our community on this water reform. It has been a long time coming. We've been talking about this since 2018, and it's vital now that we actually bring our community into this conversation. And I, for one, am very much looking forward to a general steer and hearing the thoughts of our community on this incredibly important decision. So I'm pleased that we've finally reached this stage of presenting our preferred option for consultation. So thank you to everybody involved in getting us to this important gateway. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you've done a great job of summarising what the position is that we're supporting today. So I will speak in support of the recommendation before us today as well. In my view, this is a well-considered, future-focused step for Napier. The transition pathway we are supporting for consultation here positions our city to be part of a water services model that delivers better long-term outcomes for our infrastructure, our environment, and more importantly, our people. This is not about giving something away. It's about stepping into the kind of shared service model that gives us scale, that gives us investment capability and operational expertise we simply cannot access alone. Napier has done a lot of heavy lifting in the water investment in recent years in that space, and we're in a strong position to influence the shape of this new water entity, and in particular, the delivery outcomes we talked about in the debate. This pathway allows us to stay at the table, protecting our community's interest while unlocking those benefits that we would otherwise find out of reach in the long term. I also want to highlight what the Mayor has said around consultation being the next step, and that is a good thing. It ensures that our community has a chance to understand the facts in this really complex space. They can ask questions and they can help shape our recommendations to government for what comes next. This is exactly how good governance should work, and I'm excited to hear what our community will say. So my view is this is the right decision for Napier to take out to the community, and I look forward to seeing their feedback. Thank you, Mayor Wise.
I'll open up for other speakers to the motion. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I speak in favour of the report and recommendations with some caution. I've already questioned the current legislative framework, potential for change in that framework. we've all experienced as consumers working with utility companies, whether it be cellular or internet or whatever it may be, and the frustration around hoops, loops and roadblocks to try and get service. So we sit in a very fortunate position to be able to influence how we expect any new entity to perform around customer service, asset maintenance and service delivery. So I think it's important at this step, even though there are some considerable uncertainties around legislation and around some of the modelling that may apply to the new organisations, as indicated earlier in the discussions, the Q&A, that we actually don't know what model of governance or executive or management structure may apply to a new organisation. Therefore, we don't actually know the true costs that may fall on that organisation. But at this time, I think it's really significant. It's a good timing to go out to our community and ask what are their expectations as we move forward, looking at options and analysis for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. We have had 3 speak in support, but I am going to, we have someone speaking against, but I will be also waiving the standing order around speaking rights so that everyone has an opportunity to speak today if they wish to. Councillor McGrath.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Big assumption I was speaking against, but you are, but you are correct. Look, we have done a lot of work over the years, and we know we have to do something. The government have put us in this position, but I'm not supportive of our preferred option being the regional delivery model ahead of the other two. Look, we're not a court case in Napier for our water. We have invested in, we've got plans to do big things, and if the regional model wasn't there or any of this was there, we'd still have to do it. I look at other regional delivery models in Hawke's Bay over the last few years, and I look at our civil defence, our health and our hospital setup, our buses, our regional police cells, and I challenged the room the other day to come up with a model in Hawke's Bay that actually, a regional model that worked. And the best answer was Unison. And Unison is actually voted in, the board members are voted in by the community as our councillors. So I'm not a big fan of having to go to the regional model based around our history to some degree. And then I look at some of the regional water models around New Zealand, and I look at Auckland Water and Wellington Water. To me, not working. And then we're going to say we're going to get all this expertise to run in the regional model. We can't find enough expertise in Wellington and Auckland, let alone the whole country. We get told that we're a small water entity, for a better term, in Napier. But what's the definition of small? Like I said, we seem to be quite set up as a city to deliver all these things. Small to me would be, I don't know, maybe Ekatahuna, Wairoa, places like that. I don't think we are small. I think we'll have enough debt headroom if we get credit rating. And you can have all the money you like, you've still got to be able to deliver and have organisations out there that can actually do the delivery for you. So you can have all the money you like, but you've got to be able to deliver it. So it's not my preferred model going out to the community. I guess when you become a regional model, your city becomes a minority shareholder by default if you've got 3 other, possibly 4 with the regional council in there. I'm not sure how we can dictate our future when it's being dictated by people who perhaps don't even live in our city. So not my preferred option, but I do understand it's only consultation, and we'll see what comes back to us.
Councillor Gregg.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. I would like to speak in favour of the officer's recommendation. I would like to acknowledge the water team for their huge amount of work on this topic. Thank you to council officers for your expertise and for keeping us informed through the myriad of government changes. The topic of water delivery is massive, and you have skillfully navigated us through it. Thank you.
Councillor Price.
I'd just like to speak in favour of the motion. I think it's, as the Mayor alluded to, it's good that we're actually getting out there to the public to find out what they want. And I think it was termed as a temperature gauge. Did someone refer to that? and I think it's outstanding because it has been several years, and Napier have had the lead that we're going to actually get out there and do something. We're not saying what the result is, we're just going out to ask the people, and I think anyone out there that is unsure, they should contact council staff or councillors so that they know the full picture of what we're putting forward here. Thank you.
Councillor Crystal.
Yes, I'd like to speak in favour of the motion, and just briefly, I totally agree with what the Mayor and Deputy Mayor have said, but I guess our challenge now is to communicate this to our community in language they understand, because we have lived and breathed this the whole time I've been on council, and we understand it, but like anything, when things get put out to the community, often they get twisted and turned and different versions appear. So I think that is our challenge, is to actually communicate the different options in a way that they can understand, because it is a very complex situation that, to be fair, we have been forced upon us by central government.
Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, just like to concur with everything else that's been said, and also acknowledging my colleague across the way here, where he did make some pretty valid points that resonate with me, but I'm quite interested in hearing from our community. They were very vocal against Three Waters, so under the previous regime, government, and looking forward to just hearing from them about that.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, since you're letting everyone have a go. Yeah, I'm in favour of us going out to our community with the preferred option being a regional entity, for all of the reasons that those who have spoken in favour, and even that the person who spoke against it, keeping it in the mix, I think, and offering that to our community to feed back to us on is really important. I think in all reality, this is a real long-term view that we're taking. But in the short term, the things that really matter to our community the most are that they have clean water when they turn on their taps, which over the last 6 years I have seen huge improvement over. We rarely get brown water complaints anymore. They care about their rates increasing when there is a massive weather event and them being burdened with having to pay for those things and the resilience aspect of it. They care about being able to pick up the phone or send an email and get a response as quickly as possible. And so I suppose those are the things that I will hope that they will keep in mind when they're actually giving us their feedback. Those are the things that we've considered, even though we've used probably a little bit fancier words than those in the paper. But those are the real nitty-gritty, on-the-ground things that we're saying we think are best achieved through our preferred model. So yeah, really looking forward to hearing what they think about it. It's not an easy thing to understand, but if we keep it simple, actually it can be. So yeah.
Councillor Taylor.
Well, not to be neglected and outdone, I suppose I better say something. But yeah, I support the current recommendation. I do have concerns that the process could be prolonged if one of the other authorities decide not to become part of this current regional model, because it may mean that we have to go back and remodel things that could again change what Napier has to look at into the future. So I suppose in a way I'm imploring the other councils to all agree and for us to work collectively together. This is, as Councillor Crown has said, this is not a short-term fix for something. This is actually predicting and working for a long-term solution for our whole community. So I hope that the other councils look at it from a regional perspective, the benefit for all of Hawke's Bay. Thank you.
Councillor Brown. Thank you. Look, I suppose just because everyone's speaking, I'll say that I support the motion on the table as well. And we had a bit of a chat around the efficiencies that are built into the model, and having spent a bit of time in the industry before being on council, I can see that there are a number of efficiencies within the design space and procurement space which will easily add up to those numbers. So if anyone's doubting those numbers, I'd say that they're very conservative and should be easily achievable.
Thank you. Okay. There's no further speakers. Then I thank you all for speaking, and I am going to put the motion. So all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you, team. Thank you to our presenters today. You've done a fantastic job of talking through, as has been said several times, a very complex issue. So now the challenge is obviously, as several councillors have said, take this information out to our community in an easily digestible way, which I'm sure the fabulous Jess will achieve. So we do have the consultation document coming to us on the 29th of April for adoption. So that obviously will be the opportunity. There may not be an opportunity to make too many changes or anything, but yeah, it is vital that this information is provided to our community in as simple a way as possible, and in a consultation document that clearly identifies how we've arrived at this preferred option and ultimately what it means to them, because that's what's important to our community. Yeah. So it brings us to a close. If we could all stand for our closing karakia. Kia tau te rangimarie, ki runga i ngā iwi katoa, kia piki te ora, te kaha me te māramatanga, i ngā wā katoa, te rei mauri ora. Well done, team.